Something that we are used to see in sci-fi movies is how dark and twisted the human mind can get. And let me address you something. Art imitates real life, not the other way around. Reality will always surpass what we see in movies. And I'm certain you have watched countless media in which body horror is the main thing. I don't know. Torture, mind control. Well, this is all what the MKUltra was about. And guess what? It's as real as the air that you breathe. This experiment from the CIA was classified 22 years after its beginning in 1953. The Church Committee revealed to the public in 1975 that the CIA and the Department of Defense had been conducting experimentation on human beings, both unwittingly and fully cognizant people. This was all part of the MKUltra project, led by Sidney Gottlieb, and it began by order of the CIA director of that era, Allen Dulles. MKUltra was preceded by the Project Artichoke, another experiment led by the CIA in research of methods of interrogation. The primary goal of this project was to determine if a person could be involuntarily made to perform an act of attempted brutal violence, if you know what I mean. Originating from the nature of mind control, the studies of Project Artichoke followed the research of induced effects such as hypnosis and forced addiction from certain substances, which eventually also led to study the effects of withdrawals from the same administrated substances. Fucked up shit in it. Project Artichoke and its research created the foundations for the MKUltra, which was focused completely on illegal human experiments. One of its main goals was to identify drugs that could be used in altering the behavior of a human being. Just imagine this. One thing led to another, from trying substances to induce artificial behaviors on humans. This opened the path to start the experimentation and mind control. And I know this sounds completely out there, but as I said before, reality will always surpass science fiction when it comes about being twisted. So now, let's break down the MKUltra. What was it exactly about? We know for a fact that it proceeded from Project Artichoke, which its main goal was to induce involuntary behaviors on human beings. And as I said before, this planted the seeds for the MKUltra. And we can say that this is where the countless nightmares for countless people started. Let's get to it. So the origins of this project date back to the early 1940s during the Second World War, in which Nazi scientists working in the concentration camps of Auschwitz and Dachau in Germany conducted interrogation experiments on human beings. Substances like barbiturates, mescaline, and derivatives of the morphine were used on the test subjects, which were prisoners of war that were Polish, Russian, Ukrainian, Jewish, and between other nationalities. The main goal for such horrendous acts was to develop some kind of truth serum, which in words of the operators at the laboratory in Dachau, was to eliminate the will of the person interrogated. Many American historians said that the CIA project MKUltra was a direct continuation of the conducted experiments in Dachau. Wanna know the worst part of this? Evidence was everywhere pretty much. The use of mescaline on subjects for experiments, replicating what we had seen in the Nazi laboratories, and the loudest elephant in the room, and pay attention to what I'm about to say. Was the project called Operation Paperclip? Sounds innocent, right? Operation Paperclip. Wrong. You know what the Operation Paperclip was? It was a secret project from the US in which more than 1,600 German scientists, engineers, and technicians were taken from the former Nazi Germany to the US for government employment after the end of the World War between 1945 and 1959. And guess what? Several of them were confirmed to be former members of the Nazi Party. Wanna hear the most fucked up thing from all of this? And between those Nazi operators who were recruited by the US was Kurt Blome. And I know this name doesn't sound familiar to you, but let me bring you some clarity. Kurt Blome was a high-ranking Nazi scientist that was recruited to work to consult mind control and biological weapons on the MKUltra. So now going back to the project MKUltra, we know that what the government would do to conduct such research, they would target people who didn't have a wide reach in society. And what do I mean with this? They would target individuals, persons who didn't have many friends, who didn't have much family around, or those who had a low profile. People who were easy to make disappear and nobody would notice. Persons from that time, such as factory workers, office workers, college students who were independent, basically people who were alone out there, that were an easy target to get to, and that was easy to cover tracks of. Those unfortunate people were the main test subjects that the government used for the experiments of the MKUltra. And I don't need to get ultra explicit about this, but we already know that those leading the project, they had especially inhuman methods of experimentation. Non-consensual drugging using substances like mescaline, LSD, and morphine, which the effects of these drugs completely destroyed the mind of the subject to make them vulnerable, induce fear, cause artificial behaviors such as induced amnesia and loss of cognition and ability to discern. They would also use sensory deprivation, in which the subjects were placed in controlled environments, depriving them from normal sensory, controlling things like light, sound, to induce a vulnerable state of mind in which the subjects will become malleable to those conducting the experiments, to make them believe things that were not real, to make them behave in a destructive way. They even conducted experiments to deprive the subject from sleep, making them fall into an extremely vulnerable state, which they were later persuaded with experimental hypnosis to bend the will of the subject to a point where they were not themselves anymore. And it's also very unfortunate to say that the majority of these subjects did not make it through. Most of these people faced the end in the middle of these experiments, and those who survived the multiple tests, we can say that shortly after that, were silenced by the government itself. Because, just imagine, these people knew way too much about the reality of what was going on in the shadows. They were a danger for the classified project and the government itself, so it's not hard to imagine that these victims, unfortunately, also faced their end after surviving the horrendous nightmare. Everything just with the goal to control the mind, to control the will of a person, to mess their discernment in a way that the person will become a mindless puppet. Just the way it happened to the Dr. Frank Olson, who was an expert in biological weapons and was employed and heavily involved with the CIA, especially with the project itself, MKUltra. And guess what? He was a victim himself. Yes, the same project he worked on was the same one that put an end to himself. He was dosed with LSD by Sidney Gottlieb. Yes, the same mastermind behind the MKUltra. The same guy who led the experiments. And then, just 9 days after that incident, Frank Olson found his ending by plunging from a 13th floor from the Statler Hotel in New York. The government obviously claimed it was an accident or a self-inflicted incident, but come on, you and I know perfectly what happened here. At the end, the MKUltra found its very ending when media from that time started to make reports and to spread the word about what was actually going on. The New York Times was first, revealing on their notes some of the proofs of the experiments, followed by the Washington Post, and then the rest of media rapidly started to spread the news about all the investigations about the MKUltra and the CIA. So what do you think had happened when this started to blow? The CIA executed the order to destroy and get rid of all evidence and material about the MKUltra. Although it wasn't enough to get rid of 22 years of evidence. Some documents and files were not stored properly and were spread across different facilities, which made the leaks spread easier, of course. And thanks to that is why we got access to many documents and files about the MKUltra, and is what gave notoriety to the case, which is basically what made the project to get halted, the attention of the public, and the fear of the CIA to get fully seen by it, even though it remained hidden and secret for 2 decades. It seems that clarity finally reached it. If there's one thing we can learn from all of this, is that there's no such thing as a perfect lie. Especially when what you're trying to hide is what costs the lives of countless people, the hell they went through, the fear and uncertainty they felt, how vulnerable they were against a force bigger than them. Just think about it. An individual, one person, against an entire organization, just like the government, just like the CIA. This doesn't confirm that there's more situations of the magnitude of the MKUltra happening, but also just think about that it remained hidden for years and nobody even questioned it or even imagined such situation. But it doesn't really confirm that such things don't exist either. What else could be happening in the shadows right now that we are not aware of currently? Or tell me, what do you think? But as I always say, this seems like that's another topic for another video. Let's close this portal for now. I am Devil's Advocate, or just call me D. You know exactly where to find me. Stay tuned. Join us.